be in John, of course. We are a little bump. Hey, that's pretty good for a Yeti. They're pretty tough. So, ever wonder why they named them after an animal that may not even exist? Okay, but
I think you can send it back.
yeah. So, okay, so when we look at it, we're in the book of John. We're going to start John chapter 10 today. We may get all the way through John chapter 13. We may not. Well, we're going to start being a little bit more aggressive. We're going to stop after we cover John chapter 17. Okay? Not that I don't think the last 4 chapters of John are important. They talk about the betrayal, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is very critical in our beliefs. But we'll cover through John chapter 17. Chapter 16 and 17 we will probably separate out into their own weeks because those have some very interesting things. Okay. When we look at John chapter 10, there were some very interesting things. One of these is the second point is the remembrance of God's miracle. Okay. I really didn't think that much about it until my wife pointed it out. It is not one of those festivals as listed in Leviticus. Okay. So it's like, well, what one is it? And Michelle found out. It's actually the festival of Hanukkah. So it's very interesting. That occurred in the 160s before Christ. Michelle also pointed out nowadays they call it BCE, just not BC. Before the change of the era is what they went to. It's how do people remove the greatest thing that has ever happened, how we changed our time, and then they tried to change it again. They want to remove Christ totally from it. Okay? But in John chapter 10, the first one is the sheep and shepherd. Verses 1 through 6 is basically Jesus is telling a parable. Now, John is very good about pointing out when Jesus self-explains or tells them exactly what the parable is. So in verses 1 through 6, it said, Verily, verily, out of the King James, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of the strangers. And for us, how many of y'all say, well, I know exactly what that's talking about? Everybody, right? And typically, if you're a preacher, it's because you're going to cover verses 7 through 21, where Jesus has explained what that parable is about. Okay? So as you look at it, you begin to go down, the first thing that we're going to ask is, who's the shepherd? And this is your normal Sunday school answer, right? It's Jesus. He is not only the shepherd, he is the good shepherd. And how do the sheep come in? Through the door. Okay? Who's the door? Same Sunday school answer, right? It's always going to be Jesus. Now, it's very interesting, though. Jesus actually makes a statement in these verses. He says, hey, look, there's something different about this. Is that everybody that came before me, it said, this is the way, this is, you should do it this way. He said they're thieves and robbers. They just come in to do it the wrong way, to lead people astray. Who would he have been talking about?
Rabbi.
Okay, religious people.
Rabbi.
Right? Okay.
I guess that would be the old
Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. It would have been anybody trying to lead them in the wrong way and saying, well, these are the rules. This is the way you get here. Okay? Then what we see is that Jesus says, hey, look, they're doing this all wrong. It's the wrong way. Okay? But one of the interesting things is we don't want to approach it from being the wrong people. We want to approach it as being a sheep. Okay? What do you find when you follow the right shepherd? Okay? Now, it's very interesting because in here, okay, when you look at and then we're going to come down to verse 9. It says, I am the door. By me, if any man enter it, he shall be saved. He shall go in and out and find pasture. Okay? So what happens when you find pasture? If you're a sheep, what do you get to do?
You're happy.
You're happy. You get nourishment. You get rest. Security. All those things we're all looking for. It says, if we come in by the door, we get to go in and out with him and find pasture. We get to go to that place that provides satisfaction, contentment. We get to find relief and rest. Okay. The thing about security is very interesting because we don't have to go to a point of say it's all my problems. Okay. Matter of fact, if you go look at a sheep or a flock of sheep, are they ever worried?
If they do, they faint and have a heart attack.
Okay. Makes their meat more tender. But when you think about it, it's kind of funny. Now, I've been watching some Looney Tunes on Facebook, YouTube, whatever, because I realized where violence came from. It was Looney Tunes. Okay? But there's one with this big sheepdog and the wolf or the whatever, it's always trying to get it. And this big sheepdog, every time that the dog is trying to get, or the wolf trying to get away with the sheep, one, the sheepdog's not all that worried about it, and neither are the sheep. All right? The sheep are just contently eating, and as soon as the wolf tries to carry him off, the sheepdog just really, the wolf really doesn't have a chance. Okay? When you think about it, it's not the sheepdog that's important, it's the shepherd that's trained them. It's the shepherd that guides all of them. And in the case of Jesus, he's the one that's going to keep the predators from attacking his sheep. Okay? And then it then went through the point of what is the difference between a hireling and a shepherd?
Not my problem.
Not my problem. How many of y'all have a worker or you've been around workers that basically their attitude is, not my job?
That's it. Not my problem.
Okay? When you think about it, that's what the hireling does. How come?
You don't pay me anything.
Don't have anything really invested.
Yeah, there's no vested interest in him being able or her being able to do their job correctly or completely or to do what the shepherd would have done. All right? It's not their problem. What is neat, so if you were to go through all 21 verses, what do you find neat about Jesus being the shepherd?
I think it's cool that he can pick out who his sheep are. I mean, if you think about a regular shepherd and go, and you've got all these flocks together, and to me, sheep all look alike. But he can pick out who belongs to him, and then they also know his voice.
Okay.
They're not going to follow somebody else because but that other person's not your shepherd.
Okay. So how would you personally apply that? How do you know Jesus's voice?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Well, first of all, you kind of have to know what he said, right? How do you know that?
He sent a very, very long email on the shape of the Bible.
Okay, very long email, it's 66 books long. It blew up Twitter. Okay, they couldn't handle it's more than 256 characters. Okay, so when you think about it, his word is plainly spoken in the Bible for those that know him. How come? Because he gives us the ability to understand it. And the other neat thing about it is it my job to worry who the other sheep are? Okay. When we look at it, it says this, in verse 43, he says, "Why do you not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word? If ye are my father, if ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father, you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he's a liar and the father of it." And so when you begin thinking about it, is you have two choices, right? You can either listen to a liar or you can listen to the truth. Which do you prefer?
I prefer the truth, but it's kind of hard to decipher sometimes.
It is, but it's kind of like the old saying, how do you know a politician is lying? His mouth is moving, okay? So when you begin looking at it, it's kind of like, what are they really saying? Okay? Do you hear people go around and say, hey, you can have everything you want?
Now it's like, don't infringe upon what I want.
Don't infringe upon what I want. I mean, you can't tell me I'm wrong, right? So they're going to go towards lies then, right? And if you think about it, how come Jesus says Satan is started out as a murderer from all along and the liar of all time? First question is, did Satan or did Lucifer know what was going to happen if he convinced Eve and Adam to sin?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So he started out by deceiving Eve, and then well, I don't want to say he caused man to sin, but he led men to sin, and death entered into the world. Okay. But then the other question is, how did he convince her that it was okay?
It will make you like God.
Okay. He kind of gave her a half truth, right? He said, "Surely you're not going to die." God really didn't mean that. And then he convinced her to go ahead and try it. Okay. Now that kind of to me, if I was going to go back and preach the sermon on it, Eve's problem is that she got deceived. What was Adam's problem? Do it. So what was Adam's problem? Right? And if you think about it, Adam wasn't deceived. He knew exactly what he was doing. Okay? So if you think about it, Adam's the one that the sin's accounted to because he chose to disobey God. No deception was required. Okay? But the neat thing about Jesus being the good shepherd is we know his voice and we can follow him. Okay? But the other neat thing about it is it says that Jesus knows his sheep. Okay? Now, when we're thinking about it, and most of us in here have been married for a long time. How well do you know your spouse? Pretty good? Tom's being honest. No, changes every day. Okay? Um, and has your wife ever asked you guys, do you really know me? Okay? It's an unwinnable question anyway, okay? I'd like to know more about you. Please share. Okay? But from the standpoint is, he knows everything about us. Okay? Now, sheep are kind of weird. Okay? When they stray, what does the shepherd do? Hunts for them, brings them back, chastises them, and carries them. Breaks their leg. Okay? Now, it's very interesting. How well does a sheep walk with one broken leg? Not at all. Okay? And so the shepherds really got to carry them. Okay? And the second thing that I wanted to point out is in verse 22. It says, if I didn't start reading. It says, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. Okay? This is the celebration of Hanukkah, and it's on the 8th day. After the oil has lasted for that time period, then they came in and rededicated the temple. Okay? So it was this feast of dedication. It was a celebration of the miracle of God. Why would Jesus be celebrating? Besides, he was Jewish.
God, celebration of God's faithfulness and God's sustainment. I mean, because the Festival of Lights or dedication, there was only enough oil for one day, and it lasted for 8 under God's sustainment.
Okay.
And so they could purify and make new oil.
Right.
After the temple was desecrated too, so they were cleaning it and restoring it.
Okay. So when we started off this morning, I asked about praises for God's character. Okay. Why do you want to remember what God's done?
It encourages you to continue to trust Him.
Okay. Encourages you to continue. Right. So if I was to ask, well, what's the one great thing God has ever done in your life? Okay. Besides saving you, because hopefully that's where everybody starts. But after that point, what else has God done? Okay, giving you a spouse, giving you a son. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm just going to keep going. He's been our challenge and a blessing. So, okay, so's the other one. She's a challenge and a blessing. Okay, Noah's the one that we prayed for the most. That's going to sound weird, but he was really the child that we wanted. I better watch how I say that. Okay, we want both of them. Wanted both of them. Noah was the one that we had prayed for, and Robin was the one that God blessed us with without us praying for directly. Okay, so that's one of the things. Okay, and then plainly, he is the Christ in verses 24 through 30. Okay, and it says this. It says Jesus in verse 25 said, I told you, and ye believe not the works that I have do in my Father's name. They bear witness of me, but ye believe not, because ye are not of my sheep, as I said unto you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all. No man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. Okay. So one is when he says nobody can pluck them out of his hand, what does it mean? Security of the believer. Okay. Now, not only that, what else would it mean to you? Okay. So how many of y'all have ever doubted your salvation? Why? Was it at a high point in your life or a really low point? Okay. Was it after you'd done something really bad or just when you were having a hard time? Okay. How many of y'all think that you are just horrible at times? I have to think it. Sometimes my family will tell me. Okay. How horrible do you have to be before Jesus says, I don't love you?
You have to deny him, don't you?
Okay. But if you belong to him already, how horrible would you have to be?
Can't be bad enough and good.
Can't be bad enough. If nobody else can pluck them out of his hand, how can you pluck yourself out of his hand? You can't. Okay. Now that tends to help some of us that when we screwed up or when we messed up, we really did a good job of messing up. Okay. Does it change your relationship with Christ? Not at all. Does it change your fellowship with Christ? Absolutely.
When he tells the story of the prodigal son.
Right. Okay. But once you're his, you're always going to be his. Okay. It's everlasting. Okay. Now Jesus said that he was God. He said, I and my Father are one. And basically the Jews keep saying you're God. And then works are the testimony of who he is. Okay. Now let me ask, because we're not to John chapter 11 till here in a few minutes. Okay. What works had he already done? Okay. One of the ones that we just covered last weekend is even covered in here is that they believe because they actually said, he can't be a demon because nobody else has been able to heal a blind man. Okay. Nobody else has been able to heal somebody with a withered hand. Nobody else has been able to do all these things, and it's the sign that he was truly doing God's work because only the Father could restore things to the way that they should have been. Okay? And that's what happens when we start going through the book of John is we want to see these works, okay? And we want to see that after all this time, what Jesus has said is every work I've done is from the Father and it proves who I am. Okay? And I would say it's probably where we want to look at gifts and how they're used. Okay? How many of y'all have ever watched even a small portion of a healing service? From anybody? Okay?
What?
They're called healing services. Oral Roberts even used to have some. Okay? He had the gift of healing. Okay? How come they were never well received?
Because most of them was sham.
Okay, most of them are shams. They're charlatans. Okay? If you have to put in the audience people that you know are going to be in a wheelchair and you lay your hands on them and they just jump up, okay? There's probably an issue with that. One is it was not ever meant to be a public, everybody gets to celebrate. Every time that you see Jesus healing somebody, what does he do?
A lot of times he don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it. Okay, and then there's when we see the 10 lepers, only one of them comes back and thanks him for it. Okay, and then the rest of the time he says, "Go and present yourselves to the high priest, like the law of Moses says." And then they question him. And most time, even with the guy being blinded and being healed, made to see, is he didn't even know who had done it. And when you begin looking at this, when you look at healing, Jesus has two purposes. One is to show who he was, and the second was out of his kindness to win people to his kingdom. Okay? Now, the guy that was blind said, "Hey, look, I don't know who he was, but I can tell you this, he's not a demon. He's the only one that has ever healed somebody from being blind. He must be God." Okay? And when you begin looking at that, his conviction of people being able to heal him was only God could do this. And that's what the works were really for. Okay? Then we're going to go to John chapter 11. Okay? So what I want you to do with John chapter 10, you see the notes that I have pointing out the different things. So this week, as you're going through them, kind of go through this. Can you answer that? How do these apply to me? Do I see these same things? Okay, you may not. Okay? And then I want you to do that with the others as we go through them. Okay? In chapter 11, the first thing is it starts out with saying, "Now a certain man was sick by the name of Lazarus. And he was the brother of Mary and Martha, and he was a friend of Jesus." Okay? And basically, Mary and Martha sent a note to Jesus, said, "Hey, can you hurry? Lazarus is sick." Okay? Now, if you think about it, how many of y'all think that you will die? How come? Everybody does. Why does the Bible not refer to it that way?
Going to a better place.
You're going to a better place. And if you think about it, are you really dying or are you just taking a nap?
Yeah, you're asleep.
You're asleep, right? The Bible, and even in chapter 11, is going to say it's not a sickness unto death. Okay? And basically, Jesus doesn't respond, and he doesn't go to Bethany immediately. He says, "Hey, look, it's not a sickness unto death. It's not something we really need to worry about right now." In verse 4, he says, "Not a sickness unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby." Okay? So the reason why Lazarus was sick is so that the glory of God could be revealed, and that the Son of Man may be glorified at the same time. Okay? So he says, hey, it's not that big of a deal. Okay? And then it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Then he said to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. So he's sick. Everybody's expecting Jesus to go and to heal him. That was not a question of whether if he could heal him or not. The question was, why did he wait?
To show the power of God even over death, which
Okay.
at that time, no, I mean even to this point, there's only been 2 people that have came back, and only one that never died, or 2.
Several. Okay. But when you begin thinking about it, is everybody knows that everybody dies. All right. Or passes away, goes away for a time period. Okay. Jesus said it would be to glorify. And his disciples said, hey, you waited 2 days. Let's look at this rationally. How many of y'all want to look at things rationally? Okay. Does it always work rationally? Okay. Now let me ask, is God rational? It's a weird question, right?
Depends on,
Circumstance,
no,
perspective.
because
Okay.
God said our view is not the same as his view.
Right.
Or our mind is not the same as his mind. So what's rational to him may not be rational to us.
Okay. Depends on which perspective you're looking at it. Okay. And we're not going to think like God thinks. Okay. But his disciples then try to say, hey, Jesus, you want to go back to Judea. Remember what happened last chapter? They probably didn't say last chapter. Said, but the last time you were even in that area, they wanted to stone you. Okay? So we want to go there. Are you certain this is what you want to do? Now, for man, we would probably say, that's probably a pretty smart idea. Okay, when I think about driving in Dallas, there are some areas I don't drive when it starts getting dark. Okay, because to me, that's not a rational decision. Okay, there's more shootings over in this area than if I go to this area. It's changing, by the way. There's shootings everywhere. But when you think about it, that's what the disciples were trying to do. Don't go there. Okay? And then Jesus replies, he says, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Okay? Now, here's the rationalization of humans. So, well, if he sleepeth, it's no big deal. He'll be okay. Okay? And Jesus has to quit beating around the bush, and he basically has to tell them, no, guys, Lazarus is dead. Okay? And then they go there, and the first thing that happens is that Jesus then shows up. And the first person that sees him out of his family is a lady named Martha. And she begins to approach Jesus, and Jesus begins to ask her questions. And in verse 21, it says, then said Martha unto Jesus, look, if thou hadst been here, my father had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Okay? And then Jesus replies to her, your brother shall rise again. Okay? So tell me about Martha. What's her initial thoughts?
If you had been here, it wouldn't have happened.
Wouldn't have happened if you would have been here. But not only that, I know that you and God the Father are one, and anything you ask of him, he'll do. Okay? And Jesus answered her and said, hey, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Okay? And Martha basically says, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Okay, so now I'm going to ask a really weird question. What would it mean? Did she have faith or just knowledge? She had both. She had a measure of faith that if Jesus would have been there, Lazarus wouldn't have died, and that if he asked God, God will answer him. But Jesus replied to her is, I am the resurrection and life. And she says, well, I know he'll rise again at that last day. Okay? So this is going to be one of those questions that we ask about your own resurrection. Okay? Or if you're not going to die, meeting Jesus in the sky. How many of us actually have knowledge of that? All of us, right? How come? It's in the scripture, but you've heard it from preachers and Sunday school teachers all of your church life. Okay? So you know of it. How many of y'all are really expecting it? And is there a difference?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, think about it from the standpoint of when we were children, we knew Christmas was coming. And then if we're expecting it or we're anticipating it or we're excited about it, it's like Paul said about Christ coming back, even sooner, Lord.
Okay, so let's use your analogy. How many of y'all ever went looking for Christmas gifts growing up? Okay, how many of y'all ever unwrapped them beforehand? Okay, how come? Curiosity, but that excitement of getting something, you know you're getting a gift, right? You know, but the expectation is driving you batty. Okay, you really have got to know, right? There's knowing, and then there's knowing. Okay, the knowing is I know exactly what's going to happen, and I'm looking forward to it because it's real. Okay, when we begin looking at it that way, how many of us are really expecting the resurrection to occur and meeting Jesus in the air, and we're excited and we're expecting it? Okay, would it change your way of life today? Okay, if Brother Ronnie was to get up here and Jesus had sounded the trumpet and Brother Ronnie says, "Hey, we're going right now," would you be excited? Or would you, I really wasn't expecting this. I knew it was going to happen.
You mean now, Jesus?
Yeah, I don't quite have all my clothes packed, right?
You don't need clothes. I got clothes for you.
Okay, but when you think about it, there's a difference of Martha knew. Okay, and that's actually here in the Greek. That's what it says. She knew. Okay, then the next time he asked her again, and in verse 27, she said to him, "Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world." Now, her faith is a little bit more expressed. She knows exactly who Jesus is. But it's going to change her expectation a little bit when she really sees him for who he is. Okay? And
except when he wants to open up the tomb.
well, and then the third time, he's told everybody, "Hey, roll away the stone." Okay, what's Martha's reply?
Yeah, you don't want to do that. He's stinking.
He stinketh. He's really dead.
He's been dead.
Okay, for 4 days now, he is right. That's one of the things that when we look at even laws nowadays, is they either have to be embalmed or buried within 3 days. Okay. And when you think about it, it's because that decay sets in and it is really nasty. Okay? But Martha finally says, "Okay, move it away." Okay, and then we are going to see the authority of Jesus over death. Now, when the stone is rolled away, he looks and he actually asks, not see that, but it's a result of God. Okay? And when in verse 31 it says, "And they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I know that thou hearest me always, but because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me." Okay? So first is he's reaffirming that God hears him, and then he speaks very interesting. He says, "Lazarus, come forth." Now, I kind of have a question. This is a great theological question. What if he wouldn't have used the name?
Oh, leave it all.
Everybody would have been saying, you bet, we're out of here.
There have been parties and carrying on in the grave.
Okay? And the religious leaders would have been really scared. Matter of fact, the last part of John chapter 11, okay, is that we see that it says the Pharisees fear Jesus, or the religious leaders fear Jesus. Okay? Now, what is their answer to Jesus? Here's what he's done. Somebody that is already dead comes back to life. Now, tell me how that happens, and even using the old Jewish law, who gives life? Only God. Okay? So it's one of those things that they're kind of scared. Now, they're scared for two reasons. One is that the people will follow Jesus. Okay? Does that happen today? Why do people fear somebody believing? It changes the status quo. Okay? If they're going to believe this, then it means that what we were saying is not correct. Okay? And one of the interesting things that Saul and John, they actually want to kill Lazarus again. Okay? Why? Really weird thought, right? If Lazarus was dead, this goes away. Okay? If Lazarus wouldn't have come back to life, we wouldn't be having this question. Let's just kill him again. Okay? So it's very interesting what people do. Okay? We're going to stop there. Same thing with John chapter 11. Go through it. Okay? One of the things that, as we started doing this, is we wanted y'all to find your own questions. Why would it say this? Okay? Why would this be important for us today? So we want to make certain that we're doing that. And then next week we'll cover John chapter 13 and probably John chapter 14. Okay? So that's where we're going to go. Questions? Okay? And if not, then why don't we bow for prayer, and then we'll get ready for service. Okay? Let's pray. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, Lord,